started writing at this stage of my career? And the answer is quite simple. I want to change the world. I don't think the world's changed by people in government or people in power. It's changed by the millions and millions and millions of ordinary people who can do simple acts of kindness on a daily basis. That's what's going to make the world a better place. And the other reason behind why I started writing is because during the course of my medical career, I had come face to face with suffering every day of the week. Now, the modern tendency about suffering is to anaesthetize it, give it drugs, counsel it, try and get rid of it. But in fact, suffering is common to all of us, and we really need to understand it and incorporate what it means to us each day of the week too. And let me give you a couple of examples. Many years ago, I was looking after a great guy. He was a car salesman and he had all the patter and he could sell snowflakes to Eskimos. But Bob was a really good guy, very overweight, and I had a constant struggle with him to try and get down a few kilos. And he always used to give me a hard time saying I charged him too much and, medicine should be cheaper than this. Anyhow, Bob had heart problems and ended up in hospital. He needed some valve replaced and some other big stuff done. So he was taken to hospital, and the day after he had the surgery, I got called out of the surgery and by his wife and his daughter, who were standing outside in the car park in tears. Bob had had a stroke under general anaesthetic, and they couldn't wake him up, and they didn't know what to do, and they were wondering whether to turn off the life support machine. So I said, okay, I'll go down to the hospital and see what's going on. And in fact, I'd never been to that hospital before, and I certainly hadn't been in an intensive care unit there. Anyhow, I fronted up and went in there, talked my way in, and they said, actually, his specialists are doing a round now, so why don't you go over to them? So I went over to the cubicle where they were gathered discussing rather intensely the patient behind the screens, and I looked behind the screens, and it was Bob. And he was laid out on the table. They were washing him, and he was like a beached whale with drips and tubes coming out of everywhere. And I said, is it okay if I go and say hello to him? And they said, sure, won't do any harm. So I went over to him and found a spot next to his head and said, and whispered in his ear, hey, Bob, if you don't get out of here really soon, they're going to charge you a fortune. And then I leant forward and kissed him on the forehead. He opened his eyes and he smiled. That happened years ago, and it still kind of tears me up. The people who were watching sort of thought, wow, what's happening? And sort of hastily changed their plans. And thankfully, Bob came out of hospital a few weeks later. He had had a stroke and he did have some residual problems with that, but he was fine. And the story, the outcome for me of that was that it was just something very simple, whispering in somebody's ear that, hey, there's a friend here. And just a kiss on the forehead. And the man came back from way beyond. He said he could hear voices around him, but he just couldn't be bothered to wake up until he heard this, as he called me, the skinny palm whispering in his ear. We can all do that in various ways. And one of the reasons I'm writing is to show that it's we ordinary people, we average guys in the street that can do extraordinary things, perform extraordinary acts of kindness to our neighbours, to strangers, to make a little difference in their life with very little effort from ours. And the other reason I started writing was because of the place that suffering holds in our life. All of us will have a parent, or both parents eventually, who will die. We'll lose jobs, we'll lose money, we'll have sicknesses, friends will get cancer. Suffering will come in many forms and shapes. And it's learning how to walk with those sufferings instead of carrying them as a burden. Another very personal story is that many, many years ago, our son Rory was born, and he died from cot death. And it was my misfortune to find him in his cot and try and resuscitate him, which I didn't do. That stayed with me for a long time. But you know what? Rory has helped me in my medicine ever since. Because when I come across people who are grieving, or tragedies happen to, or great people to whom terrible things have occurred, I can say to them, I understand how you are, I can understand how you feel. And just a warm embrace, a squeeze of the hand. And they know with that subconscious understanding that I share the suffering. And we all have that ability. We can all do that. So after many decades of medicine, I thought I'd try and change the world by incorporating those into books of fiction which don't threaten anybody, placed in an era which is centuries ago, with characters whom I think are pretty cute, and put them all together and create the Rosso trilogy. It's fun, it's good, it deals with some big stuff, and there's some good adventures and some great characters. I hope you enjoy them. I really enjoy creating them for you.